Week 3 discussion will be about the training design process. The output from the analysis phase provided the actual training needs to alleviate the performance deficiency. These training needs became the input for the design phase. However, to design the training needs, designers must also consider learning theories and organizational constraints. The outputs of the training design will be the inputs for the training development. First, we will look at an example of a learning theory. In this example, we would also look at how the learning theory, specifically social learning theory, may interact with the theory of design, specifically Gagny-Briggs' 9 events of instruction design. Social learning theory includes the proactive practice of using pre-training activities that prepare the student for the learning event. Social learning theory also calls for champions to demonstrate the need for the training to meet goals. Some factors to consider that may act as barriers or accelerants to the training initiatives are highlighted here. The factors to consider highlight the need to fully understand the organizational model, the practical environment, the audience, the rationale, and how the learning objectives are going to benefit the audience and the organization as a whole. Once the training begins, social theory continues a positive approach meant to create and reinforce buy-in from the audience. The limiting of distractions is also a key element to successful training, and it feeds into the Gagny-Briggs design theory by gaining and maintaining attention and ensuring that trainees fully understand the goal. Again, this slide provides factors to consider that are relevant to the organization, but also relevant to the relationships that will emerge during this training. Everything from room temperature to breaks to amenities should be discussed to relax the trainees and make them feel like the training was specifically designed for them as individuals. It's useless to try and train someone when the training is deemed to be unnecessary. The training process has to be relevant to the trainee's need and world of work. The key factors to consider here are the ways in which the learning objectives have real-world application that will be useful for the trainees in their work environment. In the event of instruction that supports retention are stimulating recall of prior knowledge and presenting relevant materials. Also during the training, it's vital to keep the subject interesting. Poorly designed training will be dull and therefore will lose the attention of the audience. Once the attention is lost, the training is lost, and all efforts to alleviate a performance deficiency will be worthless. It's also important for the trainer to consistently encourage learning. Give trainees a sense of importance and enthusiasm for the training event. Although it's hard to design enthusiasm into training, you can consider the trainees' personalities and try to make a connection with the audience. There are 3 more events of instruction that the Gagny-Briggs points out. Provide guidance for learning, elicit performance, and provide feedback. The end of the training is just as important as the beginning. A good welcome sets the tone for training, and the end must bring a satisfying closure to the training. The results of the training should leave the trainees fired up to get back to their work and implement their new abilities. The transfer from the training to the workplace is vital, and the training design needs to incorporate techniques to ensure that the transfer is completed. Reinforcement is needed to strengthen the training effort, even after training has been completed. The transfer of training cannot be stressed enough. It's vital to ensure that the training was not just a waste of resources for the organization. How well the training transfers into the workplace is an indicator of how well the training was designed, and it provides a feedback loop of evaluation to continuously improve the training. The Gagne-Briggs 9 events of instruction correspond to social learning theory as outlined in this and the next slide. Any list of constraints is going to be limited. The complexity of organizations is just too varied. But this slide and the next two slides provide a list that demonstrates some kinds of constraints that organizations face, as well as possible solutions. One of the greatest constraints, as you probably all know, may be fiscal. The availability of funding may limit the design of training. It might also be a reason that training cannot be designed at all. Fiscal decisions will have to be made, and the overall need for the training will have to be considered and balanced out with the fiscal constraints. Time is a valuable resource. It's vital to consider when preparing training. The WHO holds a definite skill set that can be applied to design training, but the scope of training may be a challenge, and a realistic evaluation of effort needs to be considered to set a time frame for the training design. The what must also be considered. The length of training, the availability of trainees, the availability of an area, even the appropriate delivery method must be addressed. The how also needs to be considered. The complexity of the project determines what materials need to be collected, how the designer will interact with the client, and how the client will interact with the project. Lastly, this slide shows how the factors may be weighted and totaled to estimate a timeline for completion. The next slide will show an example of effective communication and the specific milestones and costs associated for each in developing a one-day workshop. The main point of this slide is to show that a one-day workshop, it is not unusual to need 14 days and $15,000 to prepare. Here are some different types of costs that need to be considered for training programs. As another example of cost, a 5-day grievance reduction training may entail these expenses. The total training cost for the 5 days can easily be as high as $32,000 or more. It's easy to see that financial decisions must be made to ensure the value of training outweighs the expenses. In the next part of this lecture, we're going to talk about training objectives. There are different types of training objectives. Trainee reaction objectives, learning objectives, transfer of training objectives, and organizational outcome objectives. This is sometimes one of the hardest things to do, and you will be asked to create objectives. It's not a common mistake. It is a common mistake for designers to write learning objectives that are not comprehensive enough to be measurable, evaluated, and transferred into the workplace. Here's an example of a before and after. Here's another example. The before is a bare minimum of performance, while the after considers performance in much more detail. Training can be designed in various ways. The note, trait, and treatment interaction shows that one design is clearly a better choice. In this case, training design A gives higher or more desirable outcomes for individuals with low and high traits. However, there are times when differences in the benefits of training design options occur. In this case, training design A gets better results for individuals whose traits are high, but training design B gets better results when the individual traits are low. This requires the decision maker to implement the best choice depending on the needs of the individuals being trained. Various learning processes require corresponding training events. This is a common sense statement that requires a certain depth of insight to correlate the two. By knowing that retention is needed, for example, there might be a training event that supports the process that gains retention. Let's now compare traditional and strategic knowledge training. The determination of which type is best for the design of a training depends on some of the factors that we've already discussed. The most frustrating situation that a designer or trainer might encounter is that of relapse. Having designed an effective training but having that training lost in the transfer of performance is not something that a trainer wants to see. These 7 steps may be incorporated into the training design to help prevent relapse. In addition, the trainer can also incorporate coping strategies into the training design so that the trainees themselves can identify and cope with relapse. Another aspect of training to be considered is sequencing. 2 types of sequencing are topical and spiral. In topical, you have topic A, then B, then C. In spiral, you have topic A, Module 1, topic B, Module 1, and then topic C, Module 1. Either one may be appropriate, so the trainer should determine which will be more effective given the factors of the content training of the training and the trainee. Part of the training design is to anticipate the future need to evaluate how well the skills were transferred to the workplace. Evaluation tools, like the one in this slide, are necessary to follow up and ensure that the training was effective and that it made an impact on the organization. Finally, training design can be complex as it combines learning theories with organizational needs and constraints. As all these come together to act as the input for developing training objectives, the outputs for the training design are the determined factors for facilitating learning and transfer, the identified alternative methods of instruction, and the evaluation objectives.